What is going on, everybody? This is the beginning of episode number 32 of the Nutrient Health Project podcast. 32 episodes in. By now, you'd think I would be over the nerves before you start recording, but it's funny. I think I just get excited to do these. I will probably be a little more relaxed if Holly was next to me by my side, but she is actually taking a nap right now. So everybody, moment of silence for Holly taking a nap. But we had a long workout. We had about a 2-hour workout prior to this, so she'd be a little worn out right now. But so like I said, episode number 32, Nutrient Health Project podcast. If you are unfamiliar, my name is Andy Frisch, my wife Holly Frisch. We are co-owners of Nutrient Health and Fitness. We also work locally at Sports Village Fitness in Lebanon, Tennessee. You can find us on all the social medias and all that good stuff. If you're listening to this, you probably know all that jazz. So today, episode 32, I am going back over, and I mentioned this in episode 31, but I've done I think 12 or 13 seminars now at the gym, and the number of people that can make it in on those because of the day and time is usually a smaller group. But I've had a lot of people requesting that I put that information in the seminars out on the interwebs. So that's what this is. This is the second one of those. I did that for the last episode, episode 31. So this episode, for the fifth time now, episode 32, we're going to be talking about gut health, specifically the 5R protocol. So we've done episodes, in the past where we've talked about gut health, but I wanted to go over kind of specifically the 5R protocol, also doing it a little more organized like this, where we have the slideshow that I've presented before. A lot of the information in here is heavily pulled from a course that I have gone through and completed, and Holly is currently going through right now. It's called the Functional FNMS, so the Functional Nutrition and Metabolism Specialization. If you are at all interested in that, if you happen to be a coach, if you know anybody that is a coach and they'd be interested in it, let me know. I can definitely connect you. But it was a phenomenal course, lots of good education, not just on gut health. You learn about lab work and blood sugar and liver and physiology and thyroid and all of the things that, outside of just sets, reps, and macros and calories. So a lot of what I will be going over today pulls heavily from my notes from that. So I don't want to steal credit when I can give it to someone else. So let's get rolling with the presentation. So if you are just listening to this, I will let you know we do have the podcast live on YouTube. If you search Nutrient Health and Fitness or Health and Freshness on Instagram and YouTube, you can find us. So there are some visuals that would be good to have as you're watching this one or listening to this episode. So I think the videos are also uploaded to Spotify, though, or most podcast platforms. So you should be able to watch this as well. But on the rare chance that you are just listening to this, you can get the video too. So why aren't you watching it? So, all right, let's just roll into this Nutrient Health Project podcast, episode number 32. We are talking gut health, the 5R protocol, how to get rid of bloating, constipation, and more while improving whole body health, immunity, weight loss, and energy. I am doing this one raw with no edits. So if you are a podcast editing critic, then you're in for a rough ride. So there might be some uhs and some ums, and we'll see how we can get through this. But all right, so right off the bat, hopefully again you can see this visual, but if you're not looking at it, it's basically like a big flow chart just showing different organs and systems in the body. So at the top we've got the hypothalamus going down to the pituitary, down to the adrenals. We've got sex hormones, glucose, thyroid, liver, gut microbiome, metabolism going out to the cells. So if you're looking at this, what this is just showing you is how interconnected everything is. So if you have an issue, for example, in the liver, that could very easily affect your gut and could easily affect your thyroid, could easily affect your adrenals. So this is where a lot of what we do in our business setting is helping people. Like if someone comes to us and they are healthy, and I'll usually just kind of say it like, if the system is healthy, the system will function how it should. If the system is not healthy, then our job is to get it healthy so it can again function like it should. So this means basically, like from a health and fitness standpoint, this is the people that are working out and getting good workouts and feel like they're eating, good food, and nothing is happening. The weight's not budging. And if I look at things and it's like, now you're in a good calorie deficit, not too big and not too much, like not too small, not too big. You're in a kind of Goldilocks calorie deficit. You're doing good activity. You should be losing weight. Then this is where I want to start to look at lab work, so we can see, is there something going on with the liver, the thyroid, right, the sex hormones. We start to look at biofeedback. How is your sleep? How is your digestion? Things like that. So there are obviously hundreds of episodes that could branch off of that statement alone. But today we're going to talk gut, because the gut is one of those where you can, so say you have thyroid issues, you get the thyroid in good working condition. I guess what I should say, the sentence I'm trying to say is, the gut seems to be way more fickle than the other like organs and glands and systems of the body. The gut, and this will be different for everyone, right? Some people can deal with stress better than others, but the gut is very heavily affected by stress, and stress can be a number of things. I've talked ad nauseum about stress on this podcast, but also social posts on Facebook, posts on Instagram, right? The seminars that I've done. But if you have perfect gut health today and you have no bloating, you have no constipation, you have no gas, you have no problems, if you go through a stressful couple of weeks, then chances are you're going to be impacted in your gut somehow, some way, shape, or form. Some people experience constipation, some people experience diarrhea, some people experience more appetite, some less appetite, right? Some start to experience like gas and bloating. So we want to make sure that everything in the gut, since the gut is headquarters for a majority of your immune system, we want to make sure that the gut is healthy and running in a good condition. So the 5R protocol is essentially aimed at doing exactly that, helping the gut get back to a good, healthy state. So a healthy GI tract, or a healthy gastrointestinal tract, should ideally digest your food for your absorption, because you're not just what you eat, you are what you absorb, right? So if you're eating food, but your gut's not in a good state, then you're not going to be absorbing that food to the fullest degree. So a healthy GI tract should digest the food for absorption. It should absorb those nutrients for utilization, like in the body, right? It should defend against harmful substances. So, because if you think about it, that gut is like, the inside of your gut is kind of ground zero for a lot of the things that are coming into your body, right? We put things into our mouth, we eat them, and if there's some kind of harmful bacteria in there, the first place it's going to kind of end up is in your gut. So it needs to defend against those harmful substances. The gut is heavily involved in detoxification in conjunction with the liver, helping to kind of like metabolize toxins and get things out of your body so you can feel good, so your metabolism can be running in a healthy way. And then it, again, kind of in conjunction with that, helps to eliminate waste products. So, and I might do an episode just on the liver someday soon, because it's an episode on liver, sounds really boring. If you can start to appreciate, this is the stuff I kind of nerd out to, but how responsible the liver is for all of the operations in your body. Like most people can probably say my liver is more responsible than I am, because most organs and glands in your body have about a few responsibilities, or maybe like at most like 8 to 10 different things they're responsible for. But the liver is actually responsible for over 500 different things in the body, right? It's heavily involved in detoxification. It's heavily involved in like the breakdown of fat, just on and on and on and on. And that's why the liver has like this kind of amazing capacity to regenerate itself too. So this is not an episode on the liver, but man, I am tempted to do an episode on the liver because I think it's really cool. So, okay, this is where I'm starting to get into kind of notes territory. So this is where looking and watching the video of this is going to help. So feel free, again, if you're listening to this in the car or while you're doing your workout or something, there are a lot of slides on here that are probably going to give you information and lists, so you can kind of pause these and look at these things. But if we start to look at like the most common gut issues that we see when people come into the gym that we're working with, it's really going to be kind of breaking down into three big categories. It's either going to be SIBO, Candida, or H. pylori. So if anybody's not familiar, SIBO, SIBO, just stands for small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Candida is just a type of yeast, and then H. pylori is, I believe, Helicobacter pylori. So SIBO and Candida are both basically situations where you have good guys in the digestive system that just grow to be too much. It's like you have too many of the good guys where they don't need to be, and that can cause a bit of a problem, right? It's like if you got a Santa Claus at the mall, you go to sit on his lap, okay, cool, but now all of a sudden if you have that same room and you have 100 Santa Clauses, right, we have a problem. So there's too many, the amount of Santa Clauses in this room is too damn high. So it's a little different with H. pylori, because H. pylori is not like endemic, so just meaning it's not natural to be in the human body. We don't evolve with H. pylori in us, but H. pylori is like the most successful bacteria, I think, in the world. And I believe the stat is that it has essentially populated like over 80% of the world has H. pylori in it, in them. So again, we're not supposed to have that, and it's a nasty little bugger. It will spread through like saliva. I think if you like share a drink, if you kiss somebody that has it, like it's easy to get H. pylori. So all of these, SIBO, Candida, and H. pylori, again, these are kind of like the big three that we run across. And another thing I'll do throughout this episode is pull up what's called a GI map. It's a test that you can do. The GI map stands for Gastrointestinal Microbial Assay Plus, I believe. And what that GI map does, it's a little over $300 to do it, but it's basically a stool test. So you have it ordered, it comes to your doorstep, doorstep, whatever, potato. But the test comes to you, you do the fecal testing, you send it off, and usually within about 2 weeks, you get this long report back that tells you a pretty detailed breakdown of everything that's going on in your gut in terms of like, do you have any bad bacteria? Do you have any fungi or pathogens like parasites. I'm trying to draw a blank. Do you have an overgrowth of the good guys, right? So it's this really awesome test that you can do. Again, I know it's not cheap. It's like $330. But if your doctor can get it covered, awesome, go for it. But it's a really cool breakdown because it just kind of gives you like an actual picture of what's going on. Many times when someone comes in to the office and we're doing an assessment with them and trying to get a handle on like it starts with like, hey, how's your digestion? And if they're like, oh, let me tell you, it's not good, and they start kind of going into what the problems are, sometimes we can identify it. There are certain kind of giveaways like, oh, that really sounds like SIBO, or that really sounds like Candida. But it's nice to have that GI map because it gives you a definitive like, hey, this marker right here shows that you are very high in this type of bacteria, so therefore we can assume that you do have this going on. So the GI map is, while not necessary, essentially, it is a nice thing to have. But so kind of coming back to this, so if we've got SIBO, Candida, and H. pylori, they do all share symptoms. Those symptoms that they all share are kind of the common like gut issues, that being bloating, gas, abdominal pain, and just kind of like a change to your bowel movements, right? So things are just kind of changing up a little bit. If we get a little more specific, so on this sheet, you can see there are a ton of different symptoms kind of separating them, right? So if someone has SIBO, they're going to potentially be dealing with like some of those previous ones, gas, bloating, things like that, but also maybe potentially dealing with brain fog, food intolerances. So this is where if someone does a FODMAPs diet, if you're familiar with that, if you've ever tried going on a low FODMAP diet and experienced relief in symptoms, that's a pretty strong indicator that you might be dealing with SIBO. Because a lot of those foods, the F in FODMAP stands for fermentable, and a lot of those foods that are fermentable on the FODMAPs list will feed the type of bacteria that is in SIBO. So that's where if you have an overgrowth of this good bacteria, the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, right, SIBO, if you have that overgrowth of good bacteria and then you start feeding it the food that it wants to eat, it's just going to it's going to continue to grow. It's going to continue to cause more gas and more bloating and more stomach upset, right? So there are definitely some food intolerances when it comes to SIBO. Fat malabsorption is another issue with SIBO. So, and there are some people, I actually just had a sit down with a guy yesterday, actually, who had his gallbladder removed, and SIBO is probably the first domino that he had that caused kind of fat malabsorption, which, long story short, could have potentially led to gallbladder issues and him having to have the gallbladder removed due to gallstones being in the gallbladder. So fat malabsorption, how would you know if you have fat malabsorption? So you can look in your stool. If you go to the bathroom and your stool is more of kind of like a yellowish color or like a dark gray color, you can also even see like potentially fat droplets in the toilet. So if you see that, you may have some fat malabsorption. Another thing that could potentially signal fat malabsorption is if you just have a higher fat meal. So say you have steak or, a couple eggs, something that just is higher in fat, and you notice that you get like a lot of like gas and bloating and indigestion from it, that could also be a signal of fat malabsorption. Also in line with SIBO, we have a bunch of chronic illnesses, things like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, diabetes, neuromuscular and autoimmune diseases. You can run into vitamin and mineral deficiencies, B12 specifically, because the bacteria in SIBO is a big consumer of B12. So that means you might be taking B12 as a supplement, but you're not getting much of it because that bacteria is gobbling it up. And then kind of in line with, if you don't have good fat absorption, then you're also not going to have good absorption of the vitamins and minerals that need fat to be absorbed, like A, vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin E. So those are all things that with just SIBO that you could potentially be having a problem with. So if you can think about like, okay, I have SIBO. I've been doing a FODMAP diet, and doing the low FODMAP really helps improve the symptoms. Okay, it's helping improve the symptoms, but we know that your digestion is being negatively impacted by that small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. So if we know that your digestion is off, then that means you could potentially be running into a B12 deficiency, which for many people could very easily start to turn into a B12 and folate deficiency anemia. So then we are tired and we don't have much energy. Maybe we're cold, right? Because we're dipping into anemia now because the stomach can't absorb B12 because of the SIBO situation. So you can kind of see how this goes back to that kind of flow chart I showed at the very beginning. This is how all of these things are interconnected. If I skip over to Candida, so Candida is usually a little easier to pick up. The kind of giveaways are going to be like if you get thrush, oral thrush, white tongue, recurring UTIs, so urinary tract infections. If you get a lot of those, Candida could be at risk for that. Because again, Candida is essentially a fungal infection. It's an overgrowth of beneficial yeast in the body. I think specifically Candida albicans. So if you have that overgrowth, again, it's an overgrowth of yeast, so it can lead to recurring UTIs. It can also lead to skin and nail fungal infections. It can lead to itching in the ear, in the scalp, or I guess on the scalp, in the vagina, in the rectum. I think I've also heard of like in the armpits or in the groin, if you just notice that you have a lot of itching in those areas. Another real kind of big giveaway is carbohydrate cravings. So So this does not mean, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, I kind of want a sweet every single night, that doesn't mean that you for sure have Candida, but it could be something to consider. If it's like, I've done everything, normally there are some things I'm going to go to first when it comes to someone potentially having carb cravings. Before I say, hey, it might be Candida, I'm going to see, are we eating enough food early in the day? I've mentioned this in previous episodes, but like, if you are finding that you're wanting to eat too much at night, more than you typically want to, and especially if it's like kind of comfort foods, the number one way to stop overeating at night is to stop under eating earlier in the day. I know I've mentioned that a number of times, but we'll look at, like, is someone getting enough calories? Is someone getting enough magnesium? Are we scratching, or are we checking all of those boxes? Okay, yes, and we still have carbohydrate cravings, and allergies are kicked up, because that's another Candida issue. If you have kind of frequent allergy, outbreaks, that's another Candida thing. So if we start to see those things align, then we might look at doing a 5R protocol to help get rid of Candida. So carbohydrate cravings, fungal infections, scalp dermatitis, again, possible allergies to yeast, mold, or dust, may also induce or exacerbate asthma. So if you have asthma and you've noticed that that's been kicking up. So if any of those sound familiar, it's like, man, I've got some carbohydrate cravings, and allergies have been kind of out of control, and like my asthma is kicking up a little bit. That might be something to think about, having a Candida overgrowth. And then finally, H. pylori. This has been, at least in our experience, this has been less common than SIBO and Candida. I think if I had to say, for every person that comes in that for sure has a gut thing going on, I would say it seems like it's been about 60 to 70% of people are dealing with SIBO. Probably about like 30% of the people are dealing with Candida. And I, as far as I know, have not had anybody at least test positive for H. pylori. It's not to say that I haven't worked with anybody that has it, but I haven't dealt with it specifically myself. But if you are dealing with H. pylori, we're going to be dealing with like a burning stomach, especially like pain on an empty stomach. It's kind of a little bit different than hunger pangs, right? But it's like pain in the stomach that just kind of won't go away, even on an empty stomach. You'll get a lot of like burping, heartburn, reflux, GERD, right? Gastroesophageal reflux. I butchered that, but you know what GERD is. Acid reflux, essentially. Peptic ulcers, basically a prevalence of stomach cancers. So I can't remember the stat. I'd have to pull up my notes, but a very high amount of stomach cancers are linked to H. pylori. So this would be one of those where it's like, if you test positive, if you do a GI map and you test positive for that Helicobacter pylori, like, you probably want to identify or address that, rather. Kind of going back to the SIBO and it affecting your body and your stomach's ability to absorb B12. So another thing that will have a hard time being absorbed if you have digestive issues will be iron, because your body also needs adequate stomach acid to absorb iron properly. So if your digestion is off, you're going to have trouble essentially absorbing iron and B12. So those are two different things that can lead to different types of anemia. If you want to get an iron test, typically a doctor will run a serum iron panel. That's actually kind of more of a throwaway marker. It's not a great marker to test. It's just testing iron in the blood. We actually want to test iron that's in the tissue, so you'd be a lot better off running a ferritin score, or if you want to do total iron binding capacity, transferrin saturation, those are all markers that would be better than just regular serum iron. And if I see a lot of doctors run just a B12, like a serum, meaning blood, B12 marker, that also isn't very good. We would prefer to do something called MMA, or methylmalonic acid test. That actually shows at like a much more accurate reading for your B12 levels. The other thing that H. pylori can do is lower your HDL, commonly known as kind of like that good cholesterol, and it can raise your LDL, kind of, again, commonly known as that bad cholesterol, even though those are fairly outdated. So that's kind of a rundown of what would separate SIBO, Candida, and H. pylori. So if we look at the 5R protocol, what do those 5 R's stand for? Well, if you search 5R protocol, you'll find a lot of websites. First off, you also find there's like a 4R protocol, 5R protocol. There's even like a 7R protocol. I think even an 8R protocol. It fundamentally, they're all getting to the same thing. Some of them just have maybe a little more added to it, or maybe they swap out an R. They use a different term for it. So I'm not saying that this in front of you on the screen and what I'm about to tell you is like the end all be all 5R and these are the right ones and anybody else is wrong. These are just what we use when it comes to the 5R protocol. So a 5R protocol, again, according to us here, number 1 is reduce. Number 2 is remove. Number 3 is replace. Number 4, repopulate. And finally, number 5, restore. So again, reduce, remove, replace, repopulate, restore. So if we start to kind of dive into each one of these one by one, try and find a spot where my fat head can go on the screen without being in the way of the text. So number 1, reduce. This could also be kind of like AKA flush. So I'm using for each one of these steps, I've got kind of like a brief breakdown of like a garden analogy. I think kind of looking at the gut in terms of a garden. So a healthy garden doesn't have just one type of plant in it, right? And a healthy garden doesn't have a bunch of weeds in it. So we could look at like a gut that has what's referred to as dysbiosis. So if you hear someone say gut dysbiosis, that just means like an imbalance of bacteria. Like you've got some bad bacteria hanging out, probably not enough of the good stuff. So if someone has gut dysbiosis going on, that's essentially akin to a garden having way more weeds in it and not enough of like good, like productive plants being in the garden essentially. So I want to use this garden analogy because I think a thriving gut would be just like a thriving garden where you have a variety of plants and the soil is fresh and there are like beneficial like bugs and worms and things like that in the soil, helping to make sure that the plants and what's alive in the garden is being properly taken care of. So if we follow that and use this kind of like reduce step, number 1, the garden analogy here would, if this is reduce, aka flush, this is kind of like getting rid of the pests. So this is like pulling the weeds or getting rid of the harmful bugs like the aphids, or I feel like aphids are probably a destructive pest. Clearly, I don't know much about gardening, but bear with me. So this is going to essentially involve things like cleaning up the diet. This would be kind of like if you're going to do an elimination diet, this would be where you would do an elimination diet. And the reason that this is usually the first step is because sometimes just by cleaning up the diet and getting rid of like common problem foods, someone can experience a lot of relief. And I don't have an exact percentage, but if someone comes to us and they're experiencing gut issues, I'm not going to tell them, okay, so we are going to do an elimination diet and put you on probiotics and give you some antimicrobials and give you some digestive enzymes and give you some digestive HCl support. I'm not going to throw all of that at them. I'm going to say, hey, let's work on cleaning up the diet for 6 to 8 weeks and see how do you feel. Does that cause remission of all of the symptoms, or does that not make too big of a difference, or does that resolve some of the symptoms but we still have more work to do? So we usually start with this step of just kind of cleaning up the diet and getting rid of those kind of common problem foods like corn, soy, dairy, gluten, excessive sugar. We just start doing that to kind of clean things up and see like, hey, if we just do this simple first step and again, eat like a grown up and clean things up a little bit, does that help solve the problems? So this would also be where we're looking at like kind of individual food sensitivities. So if a lot of people have issues with corn, soy, dairy, gluten, excess sugar, maybe you notice that you're having problems with apples, and you would see that apples are on a FODMAP diet and you need to avoid them. So maybe that's something that you pull out, or another really common one would be like peppers, like bell peppers, right? Especially green bell peppers seem to cause problems for people in this area. So we would start to identify the foods that you're eating that cause problems for you specifically. So, and this can be another area where a GI map will help a little bit. There's other testing that you can do too. So like typically a doctor will run like food sensitivity tests. Sometimes those are good. Sometimes they're problematic. We've talked a little bit about leaky gut in the past. fast. So if your gut is inflamed, it can actually be letting little particles of food that would otherwise not cause problems for you. It could be letting little particles of food through the gut, and then they get into the bloodstream. And if your body sees like a tiny molecule of chicken floating around, which normally wouldn't be a problem, but it's in the bloodstream where it shouldn't be, it's going to start kind of attacking that. So that's where you can start to develop some food sensitivities to things that you normally wouldn't. And if a doctor does like a food sensitivity test, it can kind of pick up on some of those things. But it may not be that you truly have a food sensitivity. It may be that you have leaky gut. So that's where I usually try to encourage people to get their gut in working order before they start doing a bunch of food sensitivity testing. So there might also be problematic medications that someone is taking in this stage. So if someone is doing proton pump inhibitors, so those are going to be like PPIs, things like omeprazole. Those can be fairly problematic for your digestion. Sure, they might help give immediate relief for stomach acid, but they are big picture causing you to have a lot of absorption issues when it comes to your nutrients. They're also essentially, because of that, they're causing a bunch of different deficiencies throughout the body. This will be, I guess, a topic for another day on what all deficiencies is going to affect, but you could be kind of rest assured B12, iron, things that I was talking about already, but also CoQ10 is another big time deficiency for people that are taking things like PPIs. So we're also looking in this reduced stage to just kind of help get rid of stress and help reduce things that are essentially potentially irritating the gut, right? So like those foods that I mentioned, the corn, soy, dairy, gluten, excess sugar, those are essentially just a food form of stress on the body, right? It's just like kind of that jerk boss that you have, or the poor night of sleep you keep getting. Those things are all things that are going to affect the gut. Other irritants that we're going to try to get rid of in this section too, alcohol, caffeine, processed foods, even excess food additives, if we want to really get cleaned up. The only thing in all of that really pains me to say that is caffeine, because I still, at this point in time, I think Holly and I would not survive without caffeine, but it is what it is. So we're trying to basically, in that reduced stage, get rid of all of the things that are causing stress and inflammation in the gut to help the gut heal up a little bit. If we move on to the next stage, remove. So this is where we're specifically trying to remove bacteria and biofilms. So again, I think we've talked about this in past episodes, so forgive me if this is repetition, but a biofilm is if you have a bacterial imbalance. So if you have some bad guys that have set up shop in your stomach and they've been there for an extended period of time, there's a chance that they've set up some biofilms. So you can kind of think of like plaque on your teeth, how you get that kind of like, slippery plaque coating. The bacteria that's in your gut can actually create this kind of protective housing called a biofilm, and that can make it much harder for you to get rid of them because they can kind of protect them from some of the antimicrobials or antibiotics that would normally wipe them out. So if this is the garden analogy, this is where we're like pulling out the weeds and the competition. So we're going to be targeting specific infections and pathogens. So this is where in step one, we reduced, right? So we reduce the foods, we reduce the things that are irritating everything. In step two, with remove, this is where we're going to, if reduce doesn't provide that benefit, the relief rather, we're going to remove by using things like antimicrobials, antifungals, antivirals, antiparasitics, and potentially even biofilm disruptors if we need it. So these are all essentially just supplements and products that you would get. So if we give you like a couple of examples, so like antimicrobials, those are going to be things like berberine, which is, really good for blood sugar control. It also will help reduce LDL levels, as well as oil of oregano. Oil of oregano has other uses too. It's really good if you have any kind of like sickness going on. A little bit of oil of oregano kind of under the tongue, swallow it. That'll help with like throat issues. So antimicrobials, we're looking at like things like berberine, oil of oregano. Antifungals could be things like caprylic acid, which is one of the MCT, like medium chain triglyceride oils that you'll find in MCT oil, obviously. Olive olive leaf extract would be another good antifungal. Also another good thing just to have on hand for like rare circumstances where you get sick. Antivirals, we're looking at like things like vitamin D. Also reishi mushroom, red reishi, is really good as far as an antiviral. Antiparasitics, so this is a little more on the extreme side. I've only had about 1 or 2 people that we've worked with that had a parasite. It's more often going to be the antimicrobials and antifungals, but antiparasitics, if you have a parasite, then taking something like wormwood or black walnut can help with that. And then the biofilm disruptors are going to be another family of compounds. I believe bismuth salts would be in that category, as well as I think calcium EDTA, I think, is in that family as well. I don't have those written down, so I'm just kind of going off the top of my head, so forgive me if I'm incorrect on that. So if we go from remove, step 3, we're going to replace. So now we have reduced the stress coming in. We've removed the bad bugs or the overgrowth of the good stuff with the supplements. Now we are going to look at replace. So this is like digestive support. So in the garden analogy, this is essentially putting in new soil, making sure that there's water and sunlight to like help the garden be as healthy as it can be. So if the gastrointestinal tract is under stress, then we need to support its functioning. So we basically need to make sure that things like stomach acid are in good working order. As we get older, as we have more stress, even as we eat higher protein diet, these are all things that can affect your stomach acid levels. So you can get something, I've talked about this on previous episodes, but you can get betaine or betaine HCl off of Amazon. If you're, again, just listening to this and not watching the video, it's BETAINE and then HCl. The brand that we use is Now. It's just Now betaine or betaine HCl. That is essentially powdered stomach acid. So if you notice that you're eating foods and the meals are just kind of sitting there thick, they're different than enzymes, and they will essentially help the body break things down a little bit better, help you digest a little bit better. You can also get digestive enzymes. So this will be a marker that you see on a GI map where you do get at least 1 score on your pancreatic enzymes, so you can see if you're low on enzymes or not. But digestive enzymes will help you. Enzymes just across the body help like reactions happen. Excuse me. So you have things like protease, which makes like the breakdown of protein substantially easier. You have things like lipase, which breaks down fat. Amylase helps break down carbohydrates. So we can get digestive enzymes in on this step, and then we can look at also doing bile acids and emulsifiers. So this would be kind of for my gallbladder person that I was talking about, as well as even Holly, because she had her gallbladder taken out like 12 or 13 years ago. The bile acids and emulsifiers are going to be things like ox bile, artichoke extract, sunflower lecithin. But these will be people that have, so emulsifiers are things that help break down fats and help essentially break down fats to be more easily digested. So if someone is having that kind of hard time digesting fats, going back to like your bowel movements kind of turning to yellow or dark gray, or seeing fat droplets in the toilet, or just having a lot of indigestion, gas, or bloating when you have a higher fat meal, then bile acids and emulsifiers are probably going to help you out. And that, again, like I said, ox bile, artichoke extract, and sunflower lecithin. So adding those in is essentially just kind of, again, like akin to giving your body digestive support. So step 4, we're looking at repopulate. So this is where we're starting to bring in pre and probiotics. So if we're keeping with that garden analogy, this step 4, repopulate, is essentially kind of adding supplemental soil nutrients and other plants beneficial to the overall garden's health, right? So again, not a botanist. That's a plant doctor, right? Not a botanist, so I can't give you specific like, hey, this plant is good for that, but you get the idea, right? I know some plants are beneficial to other plants, so the garden analogy sticks. I'm staying by it, damn it. So prebiotics. So okay, prebiotics, probiotics, and even though we're not talking about it specifically here, postbiotics. So prebiotics are essentially typically the fibers that the bacteria eats. That's prebiotics. So that is the food that the bacteria eats. The probiotic is the actual bacteria, right? You're taking a probiotic for good bacteria. And then postbiotic is what the bacteria that's in your stomach produces that you then utilize. So the idea is to have beneficial bacteria in your stomach that you are feeding good prebiotic fibers to, and that will feed that probiotic, and then that probiotic will then put off a postbiotic that helps you feel better. Things like short chain fatty acids. Sometimes it's neurotransmitters, things like dopamine or serotonin that help you feel better. Sometimes it's vitamins and minerals that these bacteria can put off. But so pre, pro, and postbiotic. Many people are not familiar with postbiotics yet. But so if we look at prebiotics, that goes back to that FODMAP diet. And so if someone has SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, giving them the prebiotics, which many times many of those FODMAP foods they are prebiotics for that bacteria, you can see why we need to avoid giving them certain foods, because if there's already this overgrowth, right, if there's already 100 Santas in the room waiting, we only need one Santa, but there's already 100 Santas, like we don't need to feed 100 Santas, right? We need to let 99 of those Santas die off. That got really dark really quickly. But so when it comes to that, this is why repopulate the step 4 is step 4 and not step 1, 2, or 3, because we want to, again, get rid of some of the stress, remove some of the food. Even if it's SIBO, so it's an overgrowth of good bacteria, it's still an overgrowth and things are out of balance. So we need to let those things kind of die down a little bit before we start feeding them again here in this step 4. But so if it's prebiotics, again, these are going to be soluble fibers that are essentially AKA bacterial food. So again, prebiotic. These would be things like green bananas, flaxseed, chilled and cooked potatoes. So, and I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. You know, apple skins. I could, again, make a giant episode just on a list of the different prebiotic foods. If you heard me, I said green bananas, right? Not just bananas, because as a banana goes from like green to yellow to kind of like, you know, brown and spotting and everything, it's in that green state that has way more fibers, which again, prebiotics are soluble fibers. So in that green state, that banana has way more fiber for the bacteria that's going to eat it. Whereas as it's going into yellow and even like kind of like a bruised banana, those fibers are breaking down into sugars. So that's where if you get like a very yellow or even bruised banana, like they're going to be way sweeter than they would be if they're green, right? They're a little, I guess, more tart if they're green. That's also why, like, if your grandmother ever made banana nut bread, like she's always wanting to get like the big smushy, you know, well-aged bananas, because they are sweeter. They have more sugar in them. So probiotics, again, these are the good bacteria. So if we are going to add these as supplements, you're wanting to make sure there are 1 million probiotic, probably more than that, brands and products out there. The one that I would usually recommend, that Holly and I take, and that I typically recommend for most clients, here's the thing: when it comes to probiotics, the bacteria that you're taking in, these different bacteria, like you don't want to just haphazardly be popping pills with bacteria, because the bacteria that you're taking, like I said, postbiotics, right? So if this bacteria can start to set up shop, it's going to be producing something for you that you may or may not need. So this is where you can literally look at the back of, at least of a good quality probiotic, and it will tell you the specific, not only like genus and all that, but like the specific strain of the bacteria that you're getting. You can then take that and do kind of like a quick Google or Google Scholar search for that specific strain of bacteria and see what benefit does it provide. Some bacteria will help help you with your airways. Some will help you with your urinary tract, right there. I mean, there's like the list goes on and on and on. This is something that we're still like finding things out like every day. So you want to make sure that you're getting a good quality probiotic. Don't just buy, the probiotic off at the store shelves. The one that Holly and I use is from a website called Nutridyne.com. I don't know if you can even get access to this. I don't know if this is, I kind of put my foot in my mouth. I don't know if this is something that I need to send to people directly or not. But the one that we get specifically is called Ultra Biotic Multi-Strain. And we get that because it has all of these things that I'm about to mention. So you're looking for something that has a lactobifido blend or lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, commonly just kind of referred to as a lactobifido blend. You're also looking for something that has Saccharomyces boulardii, more commonly known as just S. boulardii. And then you're looking at something that also has some soil-based organisms in there as well. A lot of the probiotics that I see that people bring in that are just kind of like the cheap right off the store shelf, they have a few of the lactobifido, and that's about it. Or maybe they have like one or two of the soil base, and that's about it. So there are ones out there. If you're trying to find something, just make sure that it has lactobifido. So you want to see some bacteria that start with lactobacillus and some bacteria that start with bifidobacterium. You want to see Saccharomyces boulardii, and then you want to see the soil-based things are going to be things that start with like bacillus. So not lactobacillus. But you want to get kind of a good comprehensive, like I said, multi-strain probiotic. So the last step we're looking at is restore. So this is kind of like repairing and supporting. This is kind of commonly where most functional health practitioners like Holly and I, this is where those who don't know will commonly kind of fail and drop the ball. The garden analogy, this is like essentially putting a new fence around the garden. This is making sure that the garden stays secure and stays safe. So we've done steps 1, 2, 3, and 4 to clean out the garden, to pull out the pests and the weeds, and then we've introduced the new guys, and we're trying to feed the new guys, but we want to make sure that everything stays safe and in a good environment. So this is really about kind of restoring what's called the endothelial lining of the GI system. So the endothelial lining is basically just like the inside of your stomach is one cell thick, and it's covered by mucus. So this last step of restore is like trying to restore these layers. So we're trying to repair that endothelial lining, that one cell thick lining of the gastrointestinal system, but then we're also trying to repair and replace that kind of mucosal lining. So I think it was in the last episode, maybe not, but if you think about like putting a finger up your nose, right? You've got like typically a little bit of snot in there. That's that same kind of mucosal. It's protecting the inside of your nose from foreign invaders. That's the same thing that this mucosal lining on the gut is doing. And things like drinking alcohol or stress, or again, whatever facet stress wants to show up as, whether that's poor sleep, stressful job, whatever. But those things can start to degrade that mucosal lining. As that mucosal lining gets degraded, then that's kind of opening up the gut walls to foreign invaders to kind of coming in and setting up shop. So this restore, again, we want to repair that endothelial lining. We want to repair that mucosal lining. But then we're also looking at potentially using things like things called prokinetics. So these are especially important with people who have SIBO. So a prokinetic, kinetic is just like movement, right? So prokinetic is just something that's helping movement, i.e. just helping you stay regular, right? Helping the bowel movements kind of keep moving through. So again, typically a quick supplement that we would probably use from somewhere to like 3 to 4, even 5 months afterwards to just make sure that bowel movements, regularity, we're wanting to look at like the Bristol stool chart, see where is that person's bowel movement? Like, do they have healthy bowel movements? Are they not looking too healthy? But we're also looking for support for long-term relief. So we're making sure that we have key nutrients like vitamins A, C, D, vitamin E, zinc, carnosine is really good for gut health. Fish oil, of course, I've talked ad nauseum about as well. Glutamine is really good for good gut health. Collagen, obviously, is super important. Aloe vera, marshmallow root, and slippery elm are also some kind of common ones that we'll throw in there. So all of those things things will help to restore and replenish the gut. Now, all of these steps, kind of 1 through 5, like I said, step 1, just in like reducing everything, we're looking at doing that for like 2 months, right? And we'll see. We might not even need to go to step 2. If you do step 1, remove, and you pull these things out, and you kind of go on an elimination diet, and you start to work the foods back in after 2 months, and you don't have any problems, then good. You caught it early. But so let's say we do that reduce for 2 months, and you try to start working things back in. It's like, oop, nope, things are not agreeing with me. Then that's where we would go to some antimicrobials and antifungals. I would probably do those for 1 to 2 months. And as we're doing those antifungals, then we are at the same time making sure that we're supporting digestion with HCl or enzymes or bile acid, whatever that person needs. It's not just going to be like everybody gets the same thing, but whatever that person needs specifically. And then we're going to be doing probably a simple like multi-strain probiotic, like the one I mentioned, the ultra biotic multi-strain. And we're going to roll that for, anywhere from 2 to even 4 months. So we'll do the antimicrobials for about 1 to 2 months. We'll keep everything else in for maybe another month or 2 after that. And we'll just kind of keep checking on symptoms. And after that kind of total of like 4 months from step 1 all the way through to the end of step 4, we'll see where we are. And then if everything is good, we'll go into step 5 in this restore and basically run that out for the next like 6 months as we take out the other supplements. So we'll probably keep a probiotic, a little bit of digestive support, and whatever we need here in this restore category for that specific person, but we'll be taking out the antimicrobials. So we're going to let that kind of go to the wayside. So common mistakes that people make when it comes to like what we see with the 5-hour protocol. Using probiotics too soon. So kind of like I mentioned, if someone is dealing with an overgrowth, I wouldn't throw a probiotic in right away. I think there are differing schools of thought with that. My personal experience has been when we've put probiotics in too quickly, it just causes more issues for the person. So we usually want to try to do what we can through diet before we start throwing a supplement in. So we, again, want to reduce through that kind of elimination diet. So I wouldn't throw a probiotic right away. Not always, at least. Same thing with the prebiotic. I kind of mentioned that already, but like when someone is dealing with a SIBO, I don't want to be throwing in potential problematic prebiotic things that are going to just make more gas and bloating for the person, right? So we want to be kind of mindful of that. So common mistakes are using probiotics too soon, using prebiotics too soon. A really common mistake is not adhering to the dietary protocols consistently enough. So you don't have to be perfect when it comes to these things, but just think like the bigger the degree that you step off the path and the plan, the longer you're kind of prolonging the duration of the plan. And this is like, it's a really common thing when, especially with Candida, because Candida, the bacteria, the yeast, the fungal yeast that is Candida, feeds heavily on sugar and alcohol. So that means usually when somebody's probably dealing with a Candida overgrowth, then they need to avoid sugar and alcohol. And you can imagine how well that goes over if I say, hey, we need to avoid sugar and alcohol for the next however many months, right? It's usually one of those where people are like, all right, well, I know I need to do it, but I'm not ready yet. And they just kind of keep pushing it back. So yeah, I would say not adhering to the dietary protocols, or maybe not even starting the dietary protocols would be a problem. Stopping too soon. So again, like we're kind of looking at like 2 to 4 weeks per phase, maybe a little bit longer depending on the severity, but I would say realistically 8 weeks. I mean, I think that's going to get you through 8 to 16 weeks should get you through. Like 2 to 4 months is usually the longest it needs to be. There are definitely people out there who need to do something like 6 to 12 months. I, knock on wood, have not dealt with anybody that's had to go that long, because I know it's a frustration. It's a frustrating haul. But yeah, I would typically say somewhere between 2 to 4 months seems to be the kind of average time span when it comes to this stuff. Reintroducing potentially problematic foods too soon is another common mistake. So you want to kind of, after you've gone through that first 2 months of like reducing and eliminating foods, you want to trial a food for like 2 to 3 days. So that means you're not going to, if you cut out corn, soy, wheat, sugar, dairy, after 2 months, you're not going to, on the first day, work back in corn, soy, wheat, sugar, and dairy, right? You're going to try corn, or you're going to try wheat. You're going to try one thing at a time for 2 to 3 days. See how do you respond to this. And I would maybe even say like 4 to 5 days, because sometimes some of these, food sensitivities might show up. Like you could eat something and it might not show up for 2 or 3 days. So you need to be kind of patient when it comes to this, and we need to really be, I guess, as for lack of a better term, as scientific as you can about this, trying to identify what's actually causing the problem when you're looking at these. But basically, like, people do kind of reintroduce things either too soon or too much at once. So typically trial the food for 2 to 3 days, more than like 4 to 5 days. If problems reappear, stop that food. So, and maybe, like I said, maybe we need to go from step 1 to step 2 then, or maybe you've done an entire gut protocol and you notice that another thing that caused problems in the past, but then didn't cause problems, but now it's causing problems again. Maybe it's flared back up, but now you know what to do, right? So now you can kind of readdress it because you've gone through this. Other common problems that we see, common mistakes, people having just kind of a lack of self-awareness. Like we're just not really sure of what they're experiencing. So this is something where when I do that first sit down and I'm asking someone, do you have digestive issues? And they're like, no, no gas, no bloating. I'm pretty regular. Bowel movements are pretty good. Nothing really shows up as irregular there. And then I see them, a week later or 2 weeks later, and they're like, man, I don't know what it is, but I was wrong. I was way more, way gassier than I thought I was, whatever. It's just, if we don't have that awareness of like what's actually happening in the stomach, then it's going to be a lot harder to address that. So I think self-awareness is one of the most important traits a person can have, because if you're aware of what's going on in your body, you can tell me what's going on in your body, and I can help to resolve that. I think another big thing, this kind of goes back hand in hand with people like not adhering to the protocols or stopping too soon, is a lack of self-regulation. So this would be like basically the idea of setting a goal and sticking to that goal. This is, I think, something that kind of comes up from time to time as I'm working with people. Because if you're doing the same thing day after 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 day, it gets boring, right? You're doing the same thing. And this is where, unless you're keeping the goal and the reason that you're doing the thing day after day, unless you're keeping that all front and center, it's really easy to forget about that. It's real easy to stop by that place on the way home and get the things that you don't want to get, right? It's real easy to say like, I can step off the diet for this weekend, right? But then you wreck yourself and you undo like 3 weeks of progress with 2 bad nights. So lack of self-regulation. So we need to be able to put a goal on the calendar essentially and make it happen no matter what comes, period. So I think self-awareness is probably one of the top traits that someone should have, and self-regulation is right behind that. And then finally, kind of one of the biggest common mistakes is people just not taking stress mitigation seriously enough. I think I've mentioned this in previous episodes as well, but so going back to the course that I said I got a lot of this information from, FNMS, as I'm going through a course, I typically handwrite all of my notes. And then I will take all of those handwritten notes and type them up, or AKA digitize them, right? So I've got them as a Google Doc, and I can just kind of quick, Control F search for things. So the notes from the course, it was 152 pages of notes that I got from that course. Again, all about physiology, thyroid, liver, gut health, everything, right? Everything internally to help you be healthier and your optimal self. And those 152 pages of notes that I have typed up, if you search for stress, it pops up 132 times. So I feel like I might even have that backwards. I think it's 132 pages and stress pops up 152 times. I do believe that's the case. But either way, you can see that like stress is extremely important. So taking that stress mitigation seriously, where it's like, and it might be easier for someone to say like, all right, I'm going to try to avoid that jerk boss. I'm going to go the other way when I leave the office or something like that. But it's not it seems to be not as easy for people to say like, hey, your sleep sucks right now, so stop staying up 4 hours later on Fridays and Saturdays and go to bed like an adult. That seems to be a lot harder for people to do, right? Or, hey, you don't need to do 2-hour workouts 6 days of the week. Like, you can get in shape in a better way and not just burn yourself out. People, if they're in that routine of like, but I want to work out 2 to 3 hours a day, 6 days a week, 7 days a week, like they're not really good about scaling that back. So stress mitigation is huge when it comes to this, just because of how we pretty much all in one way, shape, or form are affected by stress in our digestive system. So really, guys, that is it for episode number 32. This has been all about the 5R protocol. If you have any questions on this, please let me know. Holly is officially up, but she's eating in the kitchen, so hopefully I'll get her on the next one. We do have a couple of joint podcasts coming up soon. We've been kind of taking some notes. So some things like, I know we are going to be doing an episode on Ozempic and like semaglutide and Mounjaro, excuse me, essentially the weight loss peptides. We're going to be doing an episode on that, kind of like the pros and cons of it, what our experiences have been working with people on it, some of the problems that some people just might not really be aware of altogether. So, but we have, I guess I won't get into too much of these because I want to develop a little bit more, but let's just say that we have a number of joint episodes coming down the pipeline, and I will be doing more episodes of the seminars. So let me do a quick little check and see, so you guys can let me know if you want me to do any of these specific podcasts, specific seminars as a podcast sooner than others. So the next ones that are potentials, again, let me know. Find me, if you have my number, text me, find me on Facebook, find me on Instagram. Again, Instagram and YouTube, it's health.end.freshness. But just let me know which ones of these you would like to hear. So we can do, I've got PCOS solutions. We've got stress and cortisol, so reducing cortisol and stress through diet and supplementation. We've got proven strategies for controlling your blood sugar, finding your caloric sweet spot, so eating for your goals, how to use fasting, kind of getting through the holidays, program design for your best body, why you're not losing weight, what you might be missing in your weight loss journey, are carbs evil, how low carb diets can actually raise your blood sugar, do calories matter, is the calories in, calories out model broken, and how to improve your sleep, fixing the most important part of your health. So we've also got the special seminar I did last month, which is talking about how food and nutrients affect your mood and depression and anxiety. And actually this coming weekend, I will be doing another seminar at the gym. That'll be seminar 13. And that is talking about fixing your hormones, fixing testosterone and estrogen through diet, supplementation, and lifestyle. So if any of those ring a bell, let me know which ones you guys want to hear. If I don't hear anything, I'll just kind of go through in order and start knocking those out, which means either PCOS or cortisol and stress would be next. So I don't know if we have a giant PCOS audience, so I might just skip to stress and cortisol and hold the PCOS one if we do get any requests for it. But with that, guys, if you have not already subscribed, please subscribe. Like, help us grow this thing. We're really trying to get the YouTube subscriber count to above 1,000. We are somewhere in the mid 800s right now. So just find us on whatever you can find us on, subscribe, please, like, share the good word. These are all labors of love. Like, the last hour and a minute that I've been recording this, I haven't been getting paid. I'm doing this because I want to help you guys. I want to give you guys information. I just want to help the world be a healthier, happier place, because on my deathbed, I want to know that I played a part in that. So help us spread the word in any way, shape, and form. Take screenshots of this stuff, tag us in it, put it on Facebook, put it on Instagram, put it on TikTok, put it on whatever you want to put it on. So with that, we'll see you on episode number 33, and I hope you all have a phenomenal rest of your day. Thank you for listening. We love you all. Holly, you want to yell anything in the background really loudly so that people can hear you?
Thank y'all for listening.
Thank y'all for listening. So I'm not a ventriloquist. That was really her. So all right, we love you all. We'll talk to you later, guys. All right, bye.